Dr. Stephen Strange had seen reality tear before. He had watched space bend like a page being folded. He had patched holes between worlds with steady hands and a steady mind. Tonight, his hands were steady. The problem was the world. He stood in a quiet room lit by candles and a soft blue circle on the floor. The cloak of levitation rested on a hook, as calm as a pet cat pretending not to listen. Strange's fingers moved in clean shapes. Symbols floated in the air like thin glass letters. They spun, locked, and clicked into place. He was not trying to show off. He was trying to stop a chain reaction. Somewhere out there, a crack between worlds was pulsing. Not in his city, not in his sky. It felt far away, like a door that should not exist, knocking from the other side. Strange lowered his chin. He narrowed his eyes. "Easy," he told the air, like it could hear him. "You're not open in here." The blue circle brightened. The floating symbols tightened into a ring. Then the room jumped. Not an earthquake, not wind. It was like the rules changed for half a second. The candles leaned sideways. The shadows slid across the walls the wrong way. The cloak shivered on its hook. Strange reacted at once. His hand snapped up. A second ring of light formed around his wrists. A shield with layered patterns flickered in front of him like a hard window. The crack hit him like a hook in the chest. His boot scraped the floor. He dug in. "No," he said, through clenched teeth. The pull grew stronger. The blue circle on the ground began to stretch into an oval. The symbols in the air wobbled. One of them shattered like thin ice. The cloak launched off the hook and wrapped around Strange's shoulders on its own, tight and protective. "Good," Strange muttered. "Stay close." He tried to anchor himself. He pressed his palm down and drew a binding seal in the air. The seal flared, then sputtered like a light bulb. Something on the other side was not just pulling, it was learning. The crack widened. The room tore open like paper. For one sharp moment, Strange saw a place that was not his world. It was dark. It was wet. It looked like a forest, but wrong. Like the same forest, copied and damaged. The air inside that tear was full of floating ash. There were vines on things that should not have vines. There was a distant sound, like a deep breath being held. Strange's eyes narrowed harder. "This is not a normal breach," he said. The pull became a shove. His shield held for a heartbeat, then folded. The tear swallowed him. Cold hit his face. Mud grabbed his boots. Strange stumbled forward and caught himself with one hand. The cloak snapped wide to balance him, like a living parachute. He looked up fast. Trees. Real trees. Night sky. No city. No sanctum walls. No friendly street lights. A quiet town smell mixed with wet leaves and something faintly chemical, like an old swimming pool. He turned in a slow circle, scanning. "Where am I?" he said, flatly. The cloak tugged at his collar, as if to say, "Behind you." Strange spun. A shape moved through the tree line, then another. Small bodies with thin wings, too many joints, too many teeth. Demo bats. Strange didn't know the name yet, but he knew a predator when he saw one. They came in fast, like arrows. Strange's hands flashed. A round orange shield bloomed in front of him. The first wave slammed into it and bounced off with sharp squeals. More poured in from above. Strange flicked his fingers. Red glowing bands shot outward like ropes and wrapped around 3 of them mid-air. They thrashed, but the bands tightened. He didn't kill them. Not yet. He watched their eyes. He watched how they reacted. The swarm hesitated. Then it surged again, not afraid, almost excited. The cloak snapped at one that got too close, slapping it out of the air like a fly swatter. "Thank you," Strange said, without looking back. He lifted both hands and made a wide circle. A portal opened above the ground, facing upward, like a glowing hole in the air. The bats dove straight into it. Another portal opened 10 feet away, facing a tree trunk. The bats burst out and slammed into the tree with a wet thud. Not enough to kill them, enough to stun. Strange shifted his stance, calm, controlled, like a surgeon. He could end this in many ways. But first he wanted answers. He pressed his fingers together, then pulled them apart. A thin net of light spread out like a web between the trees, catching the next wave. It stuck them in place, wings twitching. The forest fell quiet again, except for squeaks and frantic flapping. Strange took one step forward. He tilted his head, listening, not with ears, but with the part of him that felt magic. There was a current under the air, a pressure, a mind, and it was not human. Then a twig snapped behind him. Strange didn't turn right away. He kept his hands up, steady. "Do not come closer," he said, firm and loud. Silence. A small voice whispered anyway, not to him, but to someone else. "Dude, is that a wizard?" Strange turned slowly. 3 kids stood at the edge of the clearing, bikes tipped on their sides, flashlights shaking in their hands. One of them had curly hair and a hat. Another had a serious face and held his flashlight like it was a weapon. The third stared with wide eyes like he was watching a movie he wasn't supposed to see. They looked terrified. They also looked like they had followed the wrong sound on the wrong night. Strange's gaze softened by a fraction. "Go," he told them. "Now." Quietly. The hat kid swallowed. He took one step back. The serious kid didn't move. He stared at the trapped creatures, then at Strange, then at the strange, glowing symbol still hanging in the air like floating embers. "What are those things?" the serious kid asked. Strange didn't answer him. Not yet. Because the pressure under the air shifted. The trapped bats went still, all at once, like someone pulled a string. Strange felt it. Something far away had just noticed him. Not with eyes, with intention. Strange lowered his hands a little, but not enough to drop his guard. He spoke softly, mostly to himself. "This dimension has a mind," he said. The air seemed to tighten around his words, and in that tightness, he felt the truth like a cold finger on his spine. It had noticed him, it had listened, and it had learned something important. His name. The kids did not run. They should have. Strange had told them to. Any sensible child would have grabbed their bike and disappeared into the night. But children in Hawkins had learned a terrible lesson. If you run from the wrong thing, it follows you home. The hat kid, Dustin, took a shaky breath and stepped half a foot closer anyway. "Okay," Dustin said. "So, you're not Russian?" Strange blinked once. "I don't know what that means," Strange said. "It means..." Dustin waved at the glowing net, the portals, the red bands. "That is not, like, a normal weapon." The serious kid, Lucas, stared hard at Strange's hands. "Are you with the government?" Lucas asked. Strange's mouth tightened. "No." The wide-eyed kid, Mike, looked at the trapped creatures. His voice was smaller. "Are those from the upside down?" Strange turned his head toward Mike. "That is what you call it?" Strange asked. Mike nodded fast. Dustin pointed into the trees. "We should not be here, we know that. But we heard noises and you came anyway," Strange finished. Dustin looked guilty. "Yes." Strange exhaled slowly. He didn't like kids in danger. He also didn't like witnesses. But he liked losing civilians even less. "Listen carefully," Strange said. "This area is not safe. You will lead me to somewhere with walls." Dustin's eyes widened. "You want us to..." "Walls," Strange repeated. "A house, a shed, a building. Somewhere I can see all entrances." Lucas glanced at Mike. Mike swallowed and nodded. "Okay," Mike said. We have a place." They moved fast but quiet. Bikes rolling through leaves. Flashlights turned off. The cloak stayed tight around Strange's shoulders, occasionally tugging him away from a puddle or a branch, like it was annoyed at the forest. They reached a small house with a basement door. Dustin fumbled with keys, hands shaking. Strange watched the tree line the whole time. He could still feel that mind in the distance, like a patient watching the doctor walk into the room. In the basement, the air smelled like old cardboard, comic books, and dust. Dustin flipped on a lamp. The light made the room feel safer, even if it wasn't. Strange took one look around and set a simple ward at the stairs. A thin orange line traced the doorframe, then sank into the wood. It wasn't a prison. It was a warning system. Lucas stared. "You just drew a line." "It's more than a line," Strange said. Mike looked at Strange's face like he was trying to decide if this was a dream. "Who are you?" Mike asked. Strange paused. Names were power sometimes. In magic, in politics, in fear. "My name is Stephen," Strange said. "That is enough." Dustin tilted his head. "Stephen? Like first name only? That's suspicious." "It's cautious," Strange said. The cloak gave Dustin's hat a little tug, like it wanted to steal it. Dustin yelped and slapped his hat down. "Hey, hands, fabric, off!" Strange ignored that. He closed his eyes for 1 second and reached outward with his senses. He felt the tear. He felt the contamination. He felt something like veins under the town. "This place has been wounded," Strange said. Lucas swallowed. "Yeah, we know." Dustin stepped forward, excited despite the fear. "Okay, so, if you're like a wizard, then maybe you can—" "Stop," Strange said, sharp enough to cut through the excitement. Dustin froze. Strange looked at them, one at a time. "How long," Strange asked, "has this upside down been touching your world?" Mike hesitated. His voice went quiet. "Years." Strange's jaw tightened. Years. That meant the wound had time to grow roots. That meant it had time to learn humans. That meant it had time to become clever. He opened his eyes. "Is there anyone else?" Strange asked. "Like you? People who know?" Mike nodded. "We have friends." Lucas added. "Adults too?" "Some." Dustin brightened. "We can call them." He grabbed a walkie-talkie and turned it on. Strange watched the device like it was a toy that also might explode. Dustin pressed the button. "Code red. Repeat." "Code red," Static answered. Then a voice, tense and annoyed, cut through. "Dustin, it's late. What is—" Dustin rushed the words. "We found something. Like a person. A person. But also, not normal." The voice on the other side paused. "Where are you?" it demanded. "In my basement," Dustin said. "Please don't tell my mom." Strange stepped forward slightly and took the walkie gently from Dustin's hand. The cloak leaned in like it was curious. Strange spoke into the device, calm and clear. "This is Stephen," he said. "I need to speak with the adult in charge." There was a long silence. Then the voice said, "Who is this? Is this some prank?" Strange didn't blink. "No." He handed the walkie back. Dustin looked thrilled. "Oh my God, this is happening." Within an hour, Hawkins moved the way it always moved when fear returned. Quietly. Quickly. Like the town had practice. Hopper arrived first, because Hopper always arrived first when children were in danger. Jim Hopper came down the basement stairs like a storm. Big jacket, big boots, big anger. His eyes locked on Strange. Strange stood still, hands at his sides, posture relaxed, but ready. Hopper's hand hovered near his gun. "Who the hell are you?" Mike stepped between, then without thinking. "He saved us," Hopper snapped. "Mike, move!" Mike didn't move. Joyce Byers appeared behind Hopper, breathless and wide-eyed. She took one look at Strange's face, at the cloak that moved like it was alive, and she whispered, "Oh no." Strange noticed her fear, not panic, recognition. "You've seen other worlds," Strange said to Joyce. Joyce flinched. "Not like you." Hopper took one step closer, forcing the space between them to shrink. "Name. Now." Strange held Hopper's stare. "My name is Stephen," he said again. Hopper scoffed. "That's not a name. That's a dodge." Dustin muttered, "I told you." The cloak tugged Dustin's hat again. Dustin slapped his own head like the cloak had offended him personally. Joyce's eyes moved to the ward line at the basement door. "Did you do that?" "Yes," Strange said. Hopper looked at the line, then at Strange. "Is this a trap?" "It's an alarm," Strange said. "If something crosses it, I will know." Hopper didn't like that. His face said it clearly. He hated being outclassed in his own house, in his own town. But Joyce leaned forward, voice urgent. "Hopper, if he can do things like that, we need him." Strange didn't enjoy being talked about like a tool. He spoke before Hopper could argue again. "I did not come here by choice," Strange said. "Something pulled me. This town is connected to another dimension. That dimension is active," Lucas blurted. "The Upside Down?" Strange's eyes flicked to him. "Yes, that." Hopper's mouth tightened. "How do you know that?" Strange lifted a hand and let a small glowing circle appear above his palm. It showed nothing at first. Then thin lines formed, like a map, a rough outline of Hawkins. Under it, a darker shape pulsed, like a second layer. Everyone stared. Joyce's hand went to her mouth. Hopper's eyes narrowed. "What is that?" "A wound," Strange said. "And something is looking through it." A new voice came from the stairs, calm, controlled. "Step away from him, Jim." Dr. Sam Owens walked down like he owned the basement, which was very funny because it wasn't his basement at all. Owens took in Strange in one quick scan. Then he took in the kids. Then he took in Hopper's hand near his gun. Owens spoke carefully. "I'm Dr. Owens. I'm with—" "Don't," Hopper warned. Owens ignored him. "I'm with the government, yes. And we've had problems here before." Strange's eyes sharpened slightly. "You already know about the breach." Owens nodded once. "We do." Strange didn't relax, but at least now he understood the room. There was fear, and there was secrecy, and there was an adult who thought planning could solve everything. Owens looked directly at Strange. "Who are you?" Strange gave him the same answer. "Stephen." Owens didn't smile. "That won't be enough." Strange held out his hand. The glowing circle in his palm shifted. It displayed a simple symbol, then another, like a key turning in a lock. Owens stiffened. He couldn't read it, but he could tell it wasn't a trick. "This," Strange said, "is not technology." Owens swallowed. "No, it isn't," Hopper snapped. "So what? We just trust him because he's got lights?" Strange's voice stayed calm, but it sharpened. "You don't trust me. Fine. But you will listen. Because your town is bleeding into another world, and that world has noticed me." Owens watched Strange for a long second. Then he made a choice. Not trust, not friendship, a temporary deal. "Come with me," Owens said. "Somewhere secure. We can talk. We can test." Strange cut him off. "No cages." Owens held up both hands. "No cages. But we need to understand what you are." Strange's eyes flicked to the kids. He saw the bruises under their bravery. He saw the way they watched doors. He had seen soldiers like this before. They just wore smaller shoes. "I will come," Strange said. "But the children come too." Owens started to protest. Hopper said, "Absolutely not." Mike said, "We're already in it." Dustin added, "Also, we're the ones who found him." Lucas muttered, "That doesn't make it a good idea." Strange's cloak tightened like it agreed with Lucas, then immediately tugged Dustin's hat again like it didn't. Strange didn't argue. He simply lifted his hand again. The ward line on the door brightened. Everyone felt it, even if they didn't understand it. The air got heavier near the stairs. "This," Strange said, "is what I can do in 10 seconds in a basement." He lowered his hand. The pressure faded. "If you lock me up," Strange continued, "you will waste time, and time is the one thing you do not have." Owens looked down, then back up. "Fine," Owens said. "We do this your way." Hopper looked furious, but Joyce touched his arm. "Just let him help," Joyce whispered. Strange followed them out into the night. As they drove, he sat in the back seat of a government car that smelled like coffee and old paper. The cloak rested over his shoulders like a warm weight. Outside, Hawkins slid past. Small houses, empty streets, dim lights. It looked normal. That made it worse. Strange closed his eyes and tried, quietly, to open a portal home. Just a small one. A test. A ring of sparks formed. Then the sparks snapped out like a candle in wind. Strange's brow furrowed. The connection was blocked. Not by him. By something woven into this place. Owens watched him in the rearview mirror. It didn't work. "No," Strange said. Hopper said from the front. "Good." Strange's eyes opened. "Not good." "Concerning?" Owens asked. "Why?" Strange looked out the window at the quiet town. "Because something is keeping me here," Strange said. "And that something is not doing it by accident." Far away, under Hawkins, the wound pulsed. And somewhere in the dark on the other side, something listened like it was memorizing a new song. The facility was not a fortress, not the way Strange expected. It was hidden, yes. It had guards, yes. But it also had the feel of a place that had been built fast because people were scared. Owens led Strange into a clean room with bright lights. Cameras watched from corners. A table waited in the center, like a silent challenge. "This is the best we have," Owens said. "We can talk here." Hopper stayed near the door like a bouncer. Joyce hovered near the kids. The kids stayed near each other like they were a single unit. Owens sat across from Strange. "Tell me what you are." Strange's gaze stayed steady. "A doctor." Owens blinked. "That's not." "A surgeon," Strange added. "Then a man who lost everything. Then a student. Then a protector. I am a sorcerer." The word sorcerer landed in the room and didn't move. Dustin whispered to Mike. "I told you." "Wizard?" Strange heard him and didn't correct him. Not worth it. Owens leaned forward. "Sorcerer. Like magic?" "Yes," Strange said. Hopper scoffed. "Magic isn't real." Strange glanced at him. "Your town has a second world under it. Do not insult reality while standing on a hole in it." Hopper's jaw clenched. He didn't answer, but he also didn't scoff again. Owens spoke carefully. "Where did you come from?" "Another universe," Strange said, as if it was the simplest thing in the world. Owens stared. "That's not possible." Strange lifted his hand and made a small circle in the air. It displayed an image like a moving painting, a city skyline, tall buildings, a bright sky. Then he flicked his fingers, and the image became another. A battlefield, a strange sky, monsters, and heroes. He closed his fist. The image vanished. "It is possible," Strange said, "and it is dangerous." Owens swallowed. He looked like a man who wanted to write everything down but didn't know where to start. "Okay," Owens said slowly. "Why are you here?" Strange's eyes hardened. "I was pulled." Owens asked, "By what?" Strange took a breath. He kept his answer simple. "By a tear between worlds," Strange said. "A wound that has grown deep enough to grab something outside your reality." Dustin's eyes shined with fear and excitement. That's so cool and so bad. Owens nodded to himself like he was building a chart in his head. So, this tear, it reached out and grabbed you. Yes, Strange said. And now, it has my attention. Hopper muttered. Great. Another thing to worry about. Strange looked at the kids again. You have dealt with this breach before. Mike nodded. Lucas nodded. Dustin nodded too fast. Joyce spoke, voice tight. We have. And people got hurt. Strange's face softened, but his voice stayed firm. Then you understand why I will not waste time. Owens lifted a hand. We aren't wasting time. We're trying to be safe. Strange leaned forward an inch. Safety without action is a story you tell yourself to sleep. That stung. Owens looked away for half a second. Then Owens asked the question that mattered. What do you need? Strange's shoulders eased slightly. At least this man could get to the point. A map, Strange said. A list of known breach sites. A list of people with ongoing connection to the other side. Joyce stiffened. Hopper's eyes narrowed. Owens asked, Why those people? Strange answered simply. Because the wound uses connections like roads. If you are connected, you can be used. Will Byers wasn't in the room, but his name hung there anyway, unspoken. Joyce's face tightened like she was holding back a scream. Dustin swallowed. Mike looked down. Hopper's voice went low. You better not be talking about turning kids into bait. Strange's eyes snapped to Hopper's. I do not sacrifice children. The words came out sharp and honest. The cloak tightened around Strange's chest like it agreed. Owens watched that exchange, eyes thoughtful. You're protective, Owens said. It's called duty, Strange replied. A guard appeared at the door and whispered to Owens. Owens' face changed. What? Hopper demanded. Owens stood. We got a report. Something is happening. He looked at Strange. Now. Strange stood at once, no hesitation. Hopper looked at the kids. You stay here. Mike immediately said, No. Hopper said, Mike. Strange cut in, calm but firm. They come. Owens started. Stephen! Strange's voice dropped. If this is the same force that has chased them for years, their knowledge is part of your defense. And if your something is what I think it is, they will be targets whether they are in this room or not. A heavy silence. Hopper hated it, but he knew the truth of it. He had lived it. Fine, Hopper growled, but they stay behind me. Dustin whispered. Good luck with that. They moved. Outside, the night felt too quiet. Then the radio crackled. A panicked voice spilled out. People screaming at the high school, something in the air. Owens' face went pale. Hawkins high. Strange didn't waste another second. He raised his hand and drew a circle in the air. A portal opened, bright and spinning, right there in the parking lot. Owens stopped dead. Hopper swore. The guards lifted their guns, then didn't know what to do with them. Strange looked at Hopper and Owens like he was calling a meeting. Stay close, he said. Dustin leaned in, eyes huge. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. The cloak tugged Dustin back by the shoulder like it was sick of him. They stepped through. They came out behind the high school gym. The sound hit first. Screams, glass breaking, a deep vibrating hum that made teeth feel strange. Strange's eyes narrowed. The air here was thin, not physically thin. Thin like a fabric stretched too tight. A breach was opening. Hopper ran first, as always. Joyce followed, like fear was gasoline in her veins. The kids sprinted after them. Strange walked fast but controlled. He scanned. He didn't chase noise. He chased the source. They reached the side doors. Inside, the gym lights were flickering. The floor was crowded. A late event had been happening. Some kind of practice. Some kind of meeting. Chairs were overturned. People stampeded toward exits. Above the basketball court, the air tore open. It wasn't a clean portal like Strange's. It was a rip, jagged, wet, like something clawed through. Darkness poured out. Then creatures dropped from it. Bat-like, but wrong. More teeth than face, more hunger than mind. The first wave hit the crowd. Panic exploded. Strange moved. His hand snapped out. A broad orange shield spread across the gym like a curved wall, separating the swarm from the largest group of people. Creatures slammed into it and screeched. People hit the shield too. They bounced back like they'd run into a trampoline, startled, but safe. "Go!" Hopper shouted. "Move! Move!" Strange didn't shout. He didn't need to. His shield made a path. He opened 3 portals along the far wall, each one leading outside to clear space. People stumbled through them, half expecting to fall into hell, then realizing they were simply outside. "Keep going," Strange said, voice firm, guiding them like a traffic officer. The cloak darted out and yanked a small child away from a diving creature, lifting the kid by the collar like a kitten. It dropped the kid safely behind the shield. Strange's eyes flicked up. The tier above was growing. He needed to close it, but not while people were still under it. Lucas grabbed Mike's arm. "We need Elle." Mike's face tightened. "Where is she?" Owens, near the door, spoke into a radio with shaking hands. "Get me the buyer's house. Get me!" A creature broke away from the swarm and dove toward the door, like it sensed the adults with the guns. Hopper raised his weapon. Strange lifted one finger. A thin red band shot out and snapped around the creature's wings. It locked them together. The creature fell like a rock and hit the floor, thrashing. Dustin stared. "Red rope spell. That's sick." Strange shot him a look. Dustin whispered, "Sorry." Strange took a step forward, then another. He was now directly under the rip. The air above him smelled like burning metal and wet dirt. He lifted both hands and began to shape a ceiling pattern. The rip resisted. It pulsed. Strange felt something pushing from the other side. Not just creatures. A will. A mind. It was testing him. Strange pushed back with calm strength. The ceiling pattern brightened. Then the gym's lights went out. Total darkness for a split second. And in that darkness, Strange felt a second attack, not claws. A thought. A pressure in his skull, like someone pressing a thumb into the center of his forehead. Strange's breath caught. Images flashed behind his eyes. A hospital, his hands shaking. Blood. A car crash. Christine's face. His own voice saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. Not memories exactly. Weapons shaped like memories. Strange's jaw tightened. He forced his mind to steady. "This is not you," he whispered to himself. The pressure grew. Around him, people screamed louder, because darkness made everything worse. Strange held his ceiling pattern with one hand. With the other, he drew a quick symbol over his chest. A protective charm. The mental pressure bounced, then returned harder, more focused. Someone was aiming now. Strange understood. This was not the mind flayer swarm mind. This was something sharper. A hunter. He did not know the name Vecna yet, but he knew the style. A psychic predator. Strange's eyes snapped open in the dark. His pupils glowed faintly as he shifted his senses inward. He separated his focus. His body kept the seal. His spirit stepped halfway out. Astral projection, controlled and fast. To everyone else, Strange seemed to blur for a heartbeat, like he became 2 images at once. He looked upward, not with eyes, but with his inner sight. And there, threaded through the rip like a wire, was a signal. A path. Strange caught it like a doctor catching a pulse. He followed it for a fraction of a second, and felt a place beyond the rip. A house. A clock sound. A cold intelligence watching him with interest. Strange pulled back into himself. The lights flickered on again. Hopper shouted, "Hey, over here!" 11 stood in the doorway of the gym. She wasn't wearing a cape. She wasn't wearing armor. She looked like a kid. But her eyes were hard, her jaw was set. Her whole body was tense like a drawn bow. Strange felt her power before she moved. It was not magic. It was raw force, shaped by will. The creatures sensed her too. Some turned toward her at once. 11 lifted her hand. The air in front of her bent. 3 creatures snapped backward mid-flight like they hit an invisible wall. Their bodies slammed into the far bleachers with a cracking sound. Dustin gasped, loud. Okay, she's here. Mike ran 2 steps toward her, then stopped because the situation was chaos. 11's gaze locked on the rip above the court. Her voice was low. It's opening again. Strange didn't look away from the rip. He spoke to her like she was a fellow soldier. Yes, he said. And someone is pushing from the other side. 11's eyes flicked to him. She didn't recognize him. She didn't trust him. Her gaze went to his glowing seal, to his cloak, to the portals along the wall. Her face stayed cold. Who are you? Stephen, Strange said. I'm here by accident, but I can help. Hopper yelled from behind them. Elle, listen to me. 11 didn't take her eyes off. Strange didn't flinch. He didn't demand trust. He didn't beg. He simply did the work. He expanded his shield, protecting the last cluster of students still trapped near the center. He opened another portal and sent them out. Then he looked at 11 again. I can close the rip, Strange said, but I need you to keep the creatures off me for 10 seconds. 11's lips pressed together. Then she nodded once. It wasn't friendship. It was a battle agreement. Strange stepped under the rip again and raised both hands. 11 moved forward, planting herself like a wall. Creatures dove. 11 threw them back with sharp motions, like she was swatting wasps with invisible hands. Her nose began to bleed, a thin line. She ignored it. Strange's seal brightened. The rip shook, resisting. The mental pressure returned, stronger, meaner. Strange felt it try to slip past his charm and dig into guilt. A whisper formed inside his head, not words, but a feeling. You fail. You always fail. Strange gritted his teeth. Not today, he said very quietly. He changed tactics. Instead of closing the rip like a door, he folded the space around it like a box. A mirror space trick. Simple version. No full mirror dimension. Because the gym was full of humans and fragile reality. The edges of the rip began to bend inward. The rip shrank, fighting. 11's eyes widened slightly as she saw reality itself being handled like an object. Dustin whispered, Dude, he's like a high-level wizard. Lucas shot him a look. Now is not the time. The rip screamed, not with sound, but with a vibration in the bones. Then it snapped smaller. Strange pushed again. The rip shrank to the size of a doorway. Creatures still poured from it, but fewer now. 11 slammed the next wave into the floor with a heavy crack. Her breathing turned rough. Strange's seal reached its final shape. The rip trembled. Then, right before it closed, something on the other side stared back through it. Not a face in the normal way. A presence. A cold attention that felt personal. Strange met it without blinking. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He closed his fists. The rip sealed shut like a zipper pulled tight. The last creature on the floor thrashed, then went still, confused, like its map had been ripped away. Silence hit the gym in waves as screams faded into shocked breathing. People stared at Strange. They stared at 11. They stared at the empty air where the rip had been. Hopper walked forward slowly, gun lowered now because he didn't know what a gun even meant in this moment. Owens stood near the doorway, pale, whispering to himself, This is... Dustin stepped into the middle of the court like he owned it. He looked around at the broken bleachers, the claw marks, the stunned people. Then he looked up at Strange with wide, shining eyes. "So," Dustin said, voice trembling with awe, "you're basically like the strongest wizard ever." Strange's face stayed serious, but his eyes flicked to Dustin's hat as the cloak tugged it again. Dustin slapped the hat down. "Stop it." Strange's mouth moved just enough to almost be a smile. "I'm not here to be ranked," Strange said. 11 swayed slightly. Mike caught her elbow. She pulled away at first, then let him steady her. Her eyes stayed on Strange. "Something touched you," she said quietly. Strange's expression hardened again. "Yes." Hopper looked between them. "What does that mean?" Strange didn't answer right away. He looked up at the ceiling where the rip had been. He could still feel the echo of that stare. Then he spoke, calm and direct. "It means," Strange said, "this wasn't a random attack." Owens swallowed. "Then what was it?" Strange lowered his hands. The glow faded. His voice went colder, not from fear, but from focus. "It was a test," he said. "And now, whoever rules that other side knows there is something in Hawkins that can fight back." He glanced at 11, then at the kids, then at Hopper and Joyce. "And it also knows," Strange added, "that you are the easiest way to get to me." The gym felt colder after that, not because of temperature, because everyone understood the same simple thing at once. The Upside Down had changed the game, and Hawkins, once again, was the board. Hawkins didn't sleep after the gym. The next morning, the parking lot was full of trucks and tired people. Broken glass glittered on the pavement. Yellow tape cut the air into neat squares that did not match the mess. Dr. Owens stood near the gym doors with a clipboard he did not need. His eyes kept drifting to the same thing, the spot in the air where the rip had been. It looked normal now. That was the problem. Normal made people forget. Normal let them go back to school, back to work, back to dinner tables. Owens had learned the hard way that normal was only a thin mask. Behind him, soldiers moved equipment, cameras, lights, men in plain jackets with tight faces. They spoke in short words and avoided eye contact with the townspeople. Owens watched the crowd. Parents, students, coaches, people with coffee and shaking hands. They asked the same question over and over. "What happened?" Owens gave the same answer over and over. "Gas leak, electrical fire, panic." He hated lying. He just hated the truth more, because the truth spread. A car door shut behind him. Jim Hopper walked up with his hands in his pockets and his shoulders hard. He had not slept either. His face showed it. "Your guys are making it worse," Hopper said. Owens didn't look at him. "They're keeping it contained," Hopper snorted. "By acting like aliens landed." Owens finally turned. Something did land. Hopper's jaw clenched. "Don't say it like that." Owens lowered his voice. "He opened a hole in the air in a parking lot, Jim." Hopper's eyes flicked to the guards. "He saved people." Owens held the stare. "So did 11. And your lab people still tried to put her in a box." Hopper flinched at that. He hated that it was true. Owens looked past Hopper toward the street. A small group of teenagers stood at a distance, pretending they weren't watching. Nancy Wheeler had a notebook in her hand, even now. Steve Harrington hovered nearby like a guard dog. Owens sighed. "We can't keep this quiet forever." Hopper's voice went low. "We have to try." Owens nodded once, tight. "Then we need rules." Hopper turned away like the word offended him. Rules didn't stop it before. Owens watched him go, then looked back at the gym. He had a new problem now. A man named Stephen. A man who could bend space like it was paper. Owens didn't know if Stephen was a weapon, a warning, or the best chance Hawkins had. All he knew was this: if Stephen wanted to, Owens could not stop him. And that truth made Owens feel small in a way he did not like. In a quiet room back at the facility, Stephen sat alone at a metal table. He looked calm, but calm was not the same as relaxed. The cloak rested over the back of his chair like a watchful animal. It moved slightly every time someone walked past the hallway outside. Owens entered and closed the door. "Thank you for coming back," Owens said. Stephen didn't answer right away. His eyes were on the camera in the corner. "It's off," Owens said. "I had it turned off." Stephen's gaze returned to Owens. "Good." Owens sat across from him. "You closed the tear?" "Yes." Owens tried to keep his voice neutral. "Can you do that again?" Stephen's answer came fast. "If I have time. If people are not in the way. If the thing behind it isn't adapting." Owens swallowed. "It adapts." Stephen leaned forward slightly. "It tested me." Owens nodded. "We've dealt with the Upside Down for years. It learns. It changes. It finds angles." Stephen's eyes sharpened. "Then you understand why secrecy is weak armor." Owens rubbed his forehead. "Secrecy is the only armor we have." Stephen's mouth tightened. "You have more than secrecy. You have people. Brave people. A girl with power. Children who keep standing up." Owens hesitated, then asked the question that had been chewing at him all night. "Where did you learn to do this?" Stephen's gaze drifted for a moment, like he was looking through a wall at another life. "I was a surgeon," he said. "I broke my hands. I searched for a cure. I found something else." Owens waited. Stephen kept it simple, like he was talking to someone who needed clean facts. "I trained," Stephen continued. "I studied. I fought things you wouldn't believe. Now, I protect my world from threats that come from beyond it." Owens leaned in. "Are you the leader of that protection?" Stephen's eyes flicked, just slightly. "I do what needs doing." Owens didn't press the title. Not yet. Titles meant politics. Politics meant people trying to use you. Owens chose a different path. "What do you want?" Owens asked. Stephen looked at him like the question was strange. "I want to go home," Stephen said. "And I want your town to stop bleeding into another world before it becomes a doorway for something worse." Owens nodded. "And how do we do that?" Stephen's eyes turned harder. "We find the anchor. We treat the source, not the symptoms." Owens frowned. "Anchor." Stephen lifted one hand and drew a small diagram in the air with light. 2 circles, one on top of the other, a jagged line connecting them. "This world," he said, pointing. "That world," he pointed again. "The tear is the link, but something is holding it open, like a nail." Owens watched the glowing line. "And you can remove the nail." "I can try," Stephen said. Owens swallowed. "Try isn't comforting." Stephen's voice stayed calm. "It's honest." Owens leaned back. He measured Stephen again. Not his magic, his face, his posture, the way he chose words. Stephen was controlled, but Owens could sense a crack under that control. Guilt, like an old bruise that never fully healed. Owens had seen that look on soldiers, on doctors, on people who carried too many bodies in their memory. Owens spoke carefully. "We're going to need cooperation." Stephen's reply was instant. "You're going to need trust." Owens breathed out. "That's not easy here." Stephen's eyes narrowed. "It is never easy." Owens hesitated, then asked the biggest question he'd been avoiding. "What's your full name?" Stephen stared. For a second, it looked like he might refuse. Then the door opened without a knock. Dustin Henderson slipped inside like he owned the place. Behind him, Mike and Lucas followed, trying to look responsible while clearly failing at it. Stephen's head turned. The cloak lifted slightly, like it was annoyed. Owens stood. "This room is restricted." Dustin waved a hand. "Yeah, okay. But also someone needs to explain something to us because nobody is explaining anything and I'm going to explode," Lucas hissed. "Dustin." Mike looked at Stephen. "Are you okay?" Stephen's face softened a fraction. "I'm fine." Dustin spotted the glowing diagram Stephen had drawn and gasped. "Dude, that looks like a map of 2 planes of existence." Stephen blinked once. "That is close enough." Owens pinched the bridge of his nose. "How did you get in here?" Dustin grinned. "Doors are just doors." Stephen's mouth twitched like it wanted to become a smile but didn't allow it. The cloak reached out and very calmly stole the walkie-talkie clip to Dustin's belt. Dustin yelped, "Hey, give that back!" The cloak held it just out of reach like it was teasing him. Mike whispered, "It likes messing with you." "It does not like messing with me," Dustin said, trying to grab it. "It is bullying me." Stephen spoke without looking away from Dustin's struggle. "It is assessing you." Dustin froze. "Assessing me for what?" Stephen's eyes finally met his. "For whether you are going to get yourself killed." Dustin swallowed and lowered his hands. The cloak, satisfied, gently dropped the walkie back into Dustin's hands, like it had made its point. Owens stared at them all, then gave up with a tired sigh. "Fine," Owens said. "You can stay. But you listen." Dustin nodded quickly. "We are amazing listeners," Lucas muttered. "We're really not." Stephen looked at the kids, then back at Owens. "You asked for my full name," Stephen said. Dustin's eyes lit up again, like Christmas. Stephen spoke flatly, as if it was a fact that didn't matter. "Stephen Strange," he said. "Doctor." There was a beat of silence. Dustin's mouth fell open. "Dr. Strange." Mike blinked. Your name is really strange." Lucas stared. "Like, legally?" Stephen's eyes narrowed. "Yes." Dustin looked like he might pass out from happiness. Okay, that's insane. That is like a comic book name." Stephen's voice went dry. "It is unfortunate." The cloak tugged at Stephen's sleeve like it agreed. Owens watched that exchange carefully. A full name changed the room. It made Stephen more real, less like a myth, but it also made him easier to talk about, easier to chase, easier to put in a file. Owens didn't like that. Still, he needed something to hold on to. "Dr. Strange," Owens said, testing it. "You said this thing tested you." Stephen's gaze sharpened. "Yes." Mike stepped forward. "What does it want?" Stephen looked at him, then at the others. "It wants control," Stephen said. "It wants to expand, and now it knows I am here." Lucas crossed his arms. "So it's going to come harder?" Stephen nodded. "Yes." Dustin lifted a finger. "Okay, so when it comes harder, we do what?" "Because last night was like level 10 boss fight." Stephen's eyes flicked. "Boss fight?" Dustin waved both hands. "D&D, long story." Stephen looked at Owens. "You let children fight monsters?" Hopper's voice came from the doorway, sharp and angry. "We didn't let them. We couldn't stop them." Hopper stepped in, eyes on Stephen, then on Owens, then on the kids. His face tightened. "Get out." The kids didn't move. Stephen's gaze stayed steady. "They stay." Hopper's nostrils flared. "You don't get to decide that." Stephen rose slowly from the chair. He didn't loom, he didn't threaten. He simply stood with the quiet weight of someone who had faced gods. "They are already in this," Stephen said. "They have been in it longer than I have. They also know things you do not. That makes them valuable." Hopper's eyes flashed. "They are not tools." Stephen's voice sharpened. "Then stop treating them like secrets you hide." That hit Hopper like a slap. For a moment, Hopper looked like he might explode. Then Joyce stepped into the doorway behind him. Her eyes were tired. Her face was determined. "Hopper," Joyce said softly. "He's right." Hopper turned his head, wounded. "Joyce." Joyce held his gaze. "We can't keep doing the same thing and hoping it changes." Hopper's shoulders fell a little. Not surrender, just exhaustion. Owens watched the whole thing with a knot in his stomach. This was how it always went. Adults tried to control the situation. The situation laughed. Owens cleared his throat. "We need a plan." Stephen nodded once. "We do." Dustin leaned forward like he was in class. "Please tell us the plan." Stephen looked at the kids, then at Owens, then at Hopper. "The plan," Stephen said, "is to stop playing defense on the surface." Owens frowned. "Meaning?" Stephen's eyes went distant again. "I need to enter the other side," Stephen said. "On purpose." The room went still. Hopper's voice turned dangerous. "No." Joyce's breath hitched. "No." Mike's face went pale. 11 wasn't in the room, but her name might as well have been written on the wall. Owens leaned forward. "That's suicide." Stephen's gaze snapped back. "No, it is surgery." Dustin whispered, awed. "We're going into the Upside Down with Dr. Strange." Lucas grabbed his arm. "Stop saying it like it's fun." Stephen lifted his hand and drew a new symbol in the air. Looked like a net. Looked like a grid. "I can build a ward lattice," Stephen said. "A set of anchors around Hawkins. It will strengthen this reality and weaken the link. It will also map the tear points, so we stop being surprised." Owens stared. "Can you do that?" Stephen's voice was calm, but absolute. "Yes." Hopper narrowed his eyes. "And what's the catch?" Stephen didn't hesitate. "The catch," he said, "is that the enemy will notice what I am building." Silence again. Owens spoke slowly. "So, we build it anyway?" Stephen nodded. "Yes." Hopper's jaw clenched, but he didn't refuse. Not yet. Joyce's hands shook slightly. "If it helps, we have to try." Mike looked at the table, then up at Stephen. "If you go in there..." Stephen met his eyes. "Then I come back," Stephen said. "That is the goal." Dustin raised a hand like a teacher might call on him. "Okay. So, step 1 is lattice thing. Step 2 is go into nightmare world. Step 3 is punch." Stephen's eyes narrowed. "There will be no punching." Dustin lowered his hand, offended. "Metaphorical punching." Stephen's voice was dry. "Also no." The cloak tugged Dustin's sleeve like it agreed. Owens stood and exhaled. "We start today. I'll provide resources and locations. We'll do it quietly." Hopper grunted. "Quietly is dead." Stephen's eyes lifted slightly, as if hearing something far away. His face tightened. Owens noticed at once. "What?" Stephen's voice went low. "It's already moving." In that moment, a distant sound echoed in Stephen's mind. Not a real sound. A slow, steady tick, like a clock. Stephen didn't show fear, but his eyes turned colder because he understood the message. The enemy had heard the plan, and it was smiling. In the dark world beneath Hawkins, Henry Creel stood in a place that looked like a ruined room. Broken walls, dust that never settled, vines creeping over things that should not grow. A grandfather clock sat in the corner, tall and proud, like it belonged there. It did not tick for time. It ticked for attention. Henry's eyes were calm, his face was still, but his mind was busy. He had felt the tier open at the gym. He had felt a new force enter the board. Not like 11. 11's power was a blade. Sharp, emotional, human. This new one was a shield and a lock and a knife all at once. Magic. Henry didn't use that word. Henry didn't like words that made things sound like stories. He liked control. He liked systems. Magic was just another system he didn't own yet. He extended his senses and touched the echo of the man's presence. Stephen Strange? A doctor, a protector, a man who believed he could treat worlds like patients. Henry smiled slightly. Doctors always thought they were in charge. Henry reached deeper. He tasted the man's fear. Not fear of monsters. Fear of failure. Fear of losing people. Fear of not being enough. Henry's smile widened. That was the road. If the man wanted to build a lattice, Henry would let him work, let him think he was winning. Then Henry would offer him something. Not a fight. A choice. A door. And behind that door, the sweetest lie of all. A world where Stephen Strange never failed. The clock ticked louder, just for a moment. Then it went quiet again. And Henry began to plan. They didn't build the lattice in a lab. Stephen refused. Too many cameras. Too many hands. Too many rules that turned into chains. Instead, he chose a place that felt both hidden and honest. An abandoned building near the edge of town. Old wood. Dusty windows. A space that had once been used for storage and forgotten. When Stephen stepped inside, the air felt wrong in a familiar way, like Hawkins was always leaking just a little. He rolled up his sleeves. The cloak fluttered like it was pleased to have work. Dustin and Mike and Lucas stood a few feet back with flashlights. Hopper stood near the door, arms crossed. Joyce stood beside him, hands clasped tightly. Owens stood near a window, trying to look useful. 11 arrived last. She walked in quietly, eyes scanning the shadows. She looked at Stephen like she was measuring him. Stephen met her gaze. "Thank you," he said simply. 11's face didn't change. "I'm not doing it for you." Stephen nodded. "Good. Do it for them." He didn't point. He didn't need to. Everyone knew who them was. 11's eyes flicked to Mike, then she looked away. Stephen knelt on the floor and began to draw. He didn't use chalk from a school board. He used a fine powder he carried in a small pouch, mixed with herbs and ground minerals. It looked like pale sand. When it touched the floor, it glimmered faintly. Dustin leaned forward. "Okay, so that is wizard chalk." Stephen didn't look up. "It is a binding medium." Dustin nodded fast. "Binding medium. Got it. Not chalk." Lucas whispered, "He's going to correct everything you say." Dustin whispered back, "I know, and I love it." Stephen drew a circle, then another. Then a set of lines that crossed the circles and locked into points. The room's air changed. Not colder. Not warmer. Stronger. Like the building's bones sat up straight. Owens felt it and swallowed. Hopper felt it and looked annoyed that he felt it. Joyce hugged herself. "I hate that it's real." Stephen glanced up, gentle. "I know." He finished the central pattern and placed his palm on it. The lines sank into the floor, like ink soaking into paper. Then he stood. "This is the core," Stephen said. "Now, I need 3 anchor points around Hawkins." Owens nodded. "We have known hot spots. The lab site, the old house, the lake area." Dustin lifted a finger. "The Creel house." Hopper stiffened. "We're not going there." Everyone looked at Hopper. Hopper's voice was tight. "We don't go into haunted murder houses." Dustin muttered. "We literally go into nightmare dimensions." Hopper snapped his head. Not helping. Stephen's eyes stayed calm. "The house matters." 11's gaze sharpened. "It's where he is." Stephen looked at her. "You felt him." 11's jaw clenched. "Yes." Stephen nodded once. "Then it is an anchor." Owens stepped in quickly. "We can secure the area, quietly." Hopper glared. "Your version of quietly is 20 men with rifles." Owens didn't deny it. Stephen raised a hand to stop the argument before it grew teeth. "We do not need an army," Stephen said. "We need precision. And we need speed." Dustin looked like he might burst. "We are doing a quest." Stephen stared at him. "We are doing a repair." Dustin spread his hands. Same thing. The cloak tugged a loose cloth off a nearby shelf and draped it over Dustin's head like a hood. Dustin yelped and ripped it off. "Stop dressing me!" Mike snorted despite himself. It was the first laugh in the room all day. Stephen watched that small laugh like it mattered, because it did. Fear grew best in silence. He pointed to the map Owens had brought. A paper map, not a screen. "First," Stephen said, "the lab site." Owens nodded. "It's guarded." Hopper muttered. "Everything is guarded until it isn't." Stephen looked to 11. "Can you come?" 11's face stayed flat. "Yes." Stephen nodded. "Good." He looked at the kids. "You three stay here." Dustin's mouth fell open. "What?" Lucas said, "Thank you." Mike said, "No." Stephen's eyes narrowed. "No discussion." Mike stepped forward. "We have to help." Stephen's voice stayed firm. "Your help is knowledge and coordination. You will help from here." Dustin pointed at the floor circle. "This is our base." Stephen nodded once. "Yes." Dustin's eyes shined. "Base of operations." Stephen sighed as if that phrase caused him pain, if you must call it that. Hopper looked relieved. "Good. They stay." Joyce looked worried. "What if something comes here?" Stephen's answer was immediate. "Then it will regret it." He spread his hands, and the building's corners lit up with small sigils, like quiet nightlights. Simple. Hidden. A protective web. Dustin whispered, impressed. "Home security." Stephen shot him a look. Dustin whispered, "Binding medium security." Stephen turned away before he smiled again. Then he opened a portal. Owens flinched every time he saw it, like his brain refused to accept it. Hopper muttered, "I'm never getting used to that." Stephen stepped through with 11 at his side, the cloak flowing behind him like a flag. Hopper and Joyce followed. Owens followed last. The portal snapped shut. The base went quiet, leaving Dustin, Mike, and Lucas staring at the glowing patterns on the floor like they were staring at a sleeping dragon. Dustin breathed out slowly. "Okay." Lucas looked at him. "Okay, what?" Dustin's eyes were wide with wonder and fear. "Okay," Dustin said. "We are definitely going to die." Mike swallowed. "Not if we do it right." Lucas stared at the door. "We never do it right." Dustin lifted his walkie. "Then we do it scared." He pressed the button. "Base to team," Dustin said, voice shaking but clear. "We're online." The lab site was a scar. Even from a distance, Stephen could feel it. The ground had an old sickness to it, like a wound that healed wrong and stayed tender forever. Guards stood at checkpoints. Owens' people moved them through with clipped words and flashing IDs. Stephen didn't like it. He didn't like armed men near children. He didn't like secrets stacked on secrets. He also didn't have time to argue. They reached the center of the site where concrete had been poured and re-poured. Stephen knelt and placed 2 fingers on the ground. He closed his eyes. He felt the other side pressing like a hand against thin glass. He whispered a word under his breath and drew a symbol. The symbol sank into the concrete. The ground answered like a quiet groan. 11 watched him closely. Her nose began to bleed again, just from being near the place. She wiped it fast with the back of her hand. Stephen noticed. "You don't have to force your senses," he said quietly. 11's eyes stayed hard. "I need to know where he is." Stephen nodded. "So do I." He stood and began to draw the first anchor. This anchor was not a circle. It was a spike, a set of runes arranged like a lock, meant to bite into reality and hold. As he drew, a shiver ran through the air. Hopper stiffened. "Did you feel that?" Joyce whispered. "Yes." Owens looked around, tense. "What is it?" Stephen's voice was calm. "Resistance." A low sound rose from the ground, like something deep under the concrete was moving. Then the air around them thinned. A small tear opened near a broken wall, no bigger than a door crack. A black hand of smoke reached out. Not a creature, a probe. It touched the air, felt the magic, and pulled back like it had tasted something spicy. Stephen didn't flinch. He lifted his hand and snapped his fingers. A small shield formed over the tear like a lid. The lid pressed down, the crack sealed. Owens stared. That was nothing. Stephen's eyes stayed on the spot. That was a warning. 11's voice was low. He knows. Stephen nodded once. Yes. He finished the anchor. The runes sank into the concrete. The air thickened again, slightly. Stronger. Safer. Dustin's voice crackled through the walkie on Hopper's belt. Team, base here. We're getting, static. Hopper pressed the button. What kind of static? Dustin's voice wavered. Like, not normal. Like the radio is scared. Stephen glanced at the walkie. He felt it too. A ripple in the lines. A vibration like the lattice was being touched. Not broken. Tested. Stephen spoke into the walkie with clear authority. Dustin, he said, stay inside the ward lines. Do not step outside the building. There was a pause. Then Dustin whispered. Okay. Mike's voice came through, quieter. Is it coming? Stephen's eyes narrowed. I don't know, he admitted. But it wants you to think it is. He handed the walkie back to Hopper. Next anchor, Stephen said. The lake. Hopper frowned. Why not the house? Stephen's gaze sharpened. Because the house is where it expects us. 11's eyes narrowed. We still have to go. Stephen nodded. Yes, but not first. He opened another portal. They stepped through. And behind them, the lab site sat quiet, like a place that had never done anything wrong. But the scar under it pulsed once, very faintly, as if it was passing the message along. At Lover's Lake, the wind was sharp and cold. The water looked normal. That was another lie. Stephen stood at the shore and watched the surface. He could see the weak point in the world like a smudge. He lifted his hands and drew a thin ring. The ring hovered over the water. Then he pressed it down. The water rippled outward, not from wind, but from pressure. Joyce hugged herself. I hate this. Hopper stood beside her, eyes scanning the tree line. I hate everything. Owens tried to sound professional. This location was linked to prior incidents. Stephen nodded. It is a thin place. 11 stepped closer to the shore and stared into the water as if she could see through it. Her voice was quiet. He's listening. Stephen's hands paused. He looked at her. How do you know? 11 didn't blink. I can feel him, like a hand on the back of my neck. Stephen nodded once. He understood that feeling. He resumed the anchor work. As he drew the runes, vines under the water began to stir. Not real vines, otherworld vines, pushing into the lake like black veins. Hopper's body tensed. Here we go. The water exploded upward. Demobats burst out, dripping lake water, wings snapping open. They screamed and dove toward them like living knives. 11 lifted her hands, ready to swat them down. Stephen moved first. He clapped his hands together and pulled them apart. A wide fan of orange light spread out like a wall. The demobats slammed into it and stuck, pinned like bugs on a glass pane. They thrashed and hissed. Stephen flicked his fingers. The pinned swarm rose higher, trapped. He opened a portal above the lake and another far away over the forest. The swarm shot through and vanished into the night. 11 stared at him, lips parted slightly. You sent them away, she said. Yes, Stephen replied. Killing is slower. Hopper grunted. And messier. A deeper rumble came from under the lake. Stephen's eyes narrowed. A larger shape rose beneath the surface, too big for bats. a mass of shadow and vine, like a half-formed thing trying to become a body. Owens stepped back. "What is that?" Stephen's voice stayed calm. "The system trying to make a tool." The mass pressed against the surface like it wanted to climb out. Eleven's breathing turned rough. She stepped forward, eyes locked, and pushed. The water bowed inward, like it hit an invisible wall. The shadow mass recoiled. Stephen took the opening. He drove the second anchor into place with a sharp motion, like hammering a nail. The runes sank into the ground near the shore. The air snapped tighter, like a belt being pulled. The lake surface calmed. The shadow mass sank, unwilling, like something being forced back under a lid. 11 lowered her hands, shaking slightly. Stephen turned to her, voice steady. "Good control." 11 wiped her nose again. Blood stained her sleeve. She didn't look proud. She looked angry. "He keeps pushing," she said. Stephen nodded. "And he will keep pushing until we stop the source." Hopper stared into the dark trees. "So, the house." Stephen's face hardened. "Yes," he said. Now the house. The Creel house stood at the end of its street like it was waiting. Boards on windows, dead grass. A porch that sagged like tired shoulders. It was quiet. Too quiet. Stephen didn't trust quiet. He stood at the front gate and felt the air. It was thicker here. Not with magic. With memory. 11 stopped beside him, jaw tight. Mike's voice crackled through Hopper's walkie. "Status?" Hopper pressed the button. "We're at the house." There was a sharp inhale on the other end. Lucas whispered, "Be careful." Dustin whispered, "Please don't die, because if you die, I have to live with that." Stephen spoke into the walkie, calm. "Stay inside the base. Do not come here." Dustin's voice cracked. "We weren't going to." Mike's voice was small. "Elm, please come back." 11 didn't answer the walkie, but her eyes softened for a second. Then she hardened again. Stephen stepped forward. As soon as his boot touched the front porch wood, the world shifted. The air snapped cold. A ticking sound filled the space, loud and close. Tick, tick, tick. Stephen's eyes narrowed. Hopper's hand went toward his gun by habit. Joyce's breath hitched. Owens froze. 11's shoulders rose, tense, like she was being grabbed by the spine. Stephen lifted one hand slowly. A small orange circle formed over his palm. It didn't brighten the room, it steadied it. He walked into the house. The inside smelled like dust and old rot. Wallpaper peeled like dead skin. The floor creaked under every step. Tick, tick, tick. Stephen could feel the enemy's attention like a spotlight. He didn't panic. He mapped. He followed the pressure down the hall. At the end of it, a grandfather clock stood against the wall. It looked wrong in the house. Too clean, too present. Its face glowed faintly, like it was lit from the inside. Owens whispered, "We should not be here." Hopper whispered back, "No kidding." 11 took a step forward. The clock hands jerked. The air filled with a wave of psychic pressure that slammed into them like a wall. Joyce gasped and grabbed the doorway. Owens staggered back. Hopper gritted his teeth and forced himself to stand. 11's eyes flared with anger. She pushed back with her mind. Stephen moved at the same time. He raised both hands and drew a dome of protective light around them. The psychic pressure hit the dome and slid off like water. 11's eyes flicked to Stephen, surprise flashing for a split second. Stephen spoke quietly, directly to her. "I can shield you," he said, "but you must stay focused." 11 nodded once, breathing hard. "He's here." Stephen's gaze turned to the clock. "Yes." The clock face cracked, not physically, like reality cracked over it, showing a glimpse of something else behind. A dark red sky, floating ash. vines creeping over broken stone. Stephen felt the upside down pressing close. Then the house shifted again. The walls blurred. For a second, Stephen wasn't in a ruined hallway. He was in a hospital room. Bright lights, white sheets. Christine Palmer stood near a bed, eyes tired, voice sharp. "You always think you can fix everything," she said. Stephen's breath caught. He knew this wasn't real, but it still hurt. The trick was not to believe it. The trick was also not to let it drag you under. Stephen's jaw tightened. He spoke out loud, not to Christine, but to the force behind the illusion. "I see you," he said. The hospital room flickered. The Creel house snapped back into place. Hopper stared at him. "What did you see?" Stephen didn't answer. He couldn't waste words. Eleven's breathing turned ragged. Her eyes were locked on the clock, like it was an enemy's throat. She whispered, "He's trying to get inside you." Stephen nodded once. "Yes." Owens swallowed. "Who is he?" Eleven's voice went cold. "The one who killed people. The one who watches." Stephen stepped toward the clock. He didn't touch it. He reached into the air around it, like a doctor reaching toward a wound without making it worse. He found the anchor point. It was not an object. It was a pattern, a knot in reality tied to this place. Stephen began to draw the third anchor. The air fought him. The ticking grew louder. Eleven's nose bled harder, but she didn't step back. Hopper stood with his feet planted, refusing to be pushed out of the room. Joyce held her breath, like she was afraid breathing would make it worse. Stephen's hands moved faster. He drew runes that bit into the space itself. The clock face glowed red. Then a voice slid into the room, not through ears, but through thought. Soft, calm, poisoned. "You don't belong here, Stephen Strange." Hopper flinched. Joyce gasped. Owens went pale. Eleven's eyes widened. Stephen didn't flinch. He answered the voice out loud. "I noticed," Stephen said. The voice chuckled, like it enjoyed that. "You want to fix this? You want to lock it away?" Stephen's fingers never stopped moving. "Yes," he said. "You've failed before." Stephen's throat tightened. The illusion flickered again. Christine's face, a broken city, hands shaking. Stephen forced the images down like he was pushing a lid onto boiling water. He spoke through clenched teeth. "Not today." The voice softened, like it was pretending to be kind. "I can help you." 11's eyes snapped. "No!" Stephen's last rune slammed into place. The third anchor sank into the house like a nail driven deep. For a heartbeat, the ticking stopped. The air snapped tighter. The Creel house shuddered like it was being held in place by invisible chains. Then the pressure surged. Not a tear this time. A strike. The walls darkened, and vines burst through cracks in the floor, whipping like black snakes. Demobats poured from the ceiling like spilled ink. Hopper raised his gun and fired on instinct. It did almost nothing. Stephen's eyes flashed. He spun once, cloak flaring, and slammed both palms outward. A wave of orange force swept through the hallway. The vines froze mid-whip and snapped like dry sticks. The demobats hit the wave and got shoved backward into a tight cluster. Stephen drew a red symbol, and the cluster got wrapped in crimson bands, bound tight like a giant knot. 11 lifted her hand and crushed the cluster against the far wall with a brutal slam. The house shook. Dust rained down. For a second, the battle stopped. Then the clock face cracked wider, and a dark shape appeared behind it, like a silhouette in deep water. A man shape, tall and thin, with a stillness that felt wrong. 11's breath hitched. "It's him," Owens whispered. "Jesus." Hopper stepped forward without thinking. "Get away from her." Stephen's voice was low. "Do not engage the projection." Hopper didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. the silhouette's eyes fixed on Stephen. The voice returned, quieter now, almost pleased. You built your locks. Good. You're like me. Stephen's jaw clenched. No. Yes, the voice insisted. You want order. You want control. You want to stop pain by stopping choice. Stephen felt the trap. It wasn't trying to win a fight. It was trying to win a story. It wanted Stephen to see himself as the same kind of monster. Stephen refused. He lifted his hand and drew a small, sharp symbol in the air. A cut. A severing. A simple act, done with precision. The silhouette flickered as if the connection line had been sliced. The clock face dimmed. The house's pressure eased slightly. 11 swayed, breathing hard. Stephen stepped back, eyes still on the clock. He did not look victorious. He looked like a man who had just seen the shape of a bigger war. Hopper's voice was rough. Is it gone? Stephen shook his head once. No. It pulled back. Owens stared. Then what did we do? Stephen's eyes narrowed. We told it Hawkins is no longer an open door. 11 wiped her nose and stared at Stephen with something new in her eyes. Not trust, not fear, recognition. You can block him, she said. Stephen met her gaze. Yes, 11's voice dropped. Then we can hurt him. Stephen didn't promise what he couldn't prove, but he didn't deny her either. We can try, he said. Hopper's walkie crackled. Dustin's voice burst through, panicked. Guys, base is getting hit with the clock thing. The lights are… Mike's voice cut in, tight. Will is screaming. Joyce, he's hearing it. Joyce's face drained of color. Will, she whispered. Stephen's head snapped up. He felt it too now. The enemy had changed targets. While Stephen hammered nails into Hawkins, the enemy aimed at the softest link. A boy who had been connected for years. Stephen's voice turned sharp. Hopper, he said. Portal. Now. Hopper didn't ask questions. Stephen opened a portal in the hallway. They stepped through. The Creel house vanished behind them like a bad dream. But the ticking followed. Not as a sound, as a promise. Back at the base, the ward lights were pulsing. Dustin stood in the center of the building with both hands on, his head trying not to panic. Mike and Lucas hovered near the doorway, blocking it like they could stop darkness with their bodies. Will Byers lay on the floor near the center circle, shaking. His eyes were open, but not seeing. His hands clawed at his shirt like he was drowning in air. Joyce was on her knees beside him, crying and trying to hold him still. Will, please, she begged. Stay with me. Will's voice came out strangled. It's here. The air in the room bent. Stephen's portal opened, and he stepped through like a blade entering a wound. 11 followed, face pale and furious. Hopper followed, moving fast. Owens stumbled through last, looking like he wanted to throw up. Stephen took one look at Will and understood at once. The connection was active. The enemy was using Will as a wire. Stephen dropped to his knees beside Will. He placed 2 fingers on Will's forehead. Will jerked as if burned. Stephen's voice was low and steady, meant to be heard through panic. Will, Stephen said, listen to me. You are here, in this room, with your mother. Will's eyes flickered. Joyce grabbed Stephen's sleeve. Fix him, please. Stephen met her gaze. I will try. He looked to 11. I need you. 11 stepped closer, trembling with anger. Tell me. Stephen spoke clearly. Simple words. I'm going into his mind, Stephen said. Not to take control, to shield him. You will push the enemy back while I cut the link. 11 nodded once, jaw set. Stephen pressed his palm to Will's chest. His other hand lifted and drew a small symbol over Will's heart. The symbol sank like warm light into cold skin. Then Stephen closed his eyes. His body stayed kneeling, but his spirit stepped out. The world shifted. Stephen stood in a gray place that felt like a memory with the color drained out. Will's mind. But not just Will's mind. A hallway stretched ahead, too long to belong in any real house. The grandfather clock ticked at the far end. Tick, tick, tick. Stephen felt the enemy on the other side of the hallway, like a shadow behind a door. He did not run forward like a hero in a movie. He walked, controlled. He kept his shields up. As he moved, images flickered on the walls like broken TV screens. Will alone in the woods. Will cold and shaking. Will hearing voices no one else heard. The enemy had used fear as a leash for years. Stephen reached the clock. The hallway darkened. A tall shape formed behind the clock, not fully there, but enough. The voice returned, smooth. "You're brave," it said, "but you're tired." Stephen's eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" The voice felt amused. "What you want? A world that obeys." Stephen didn't argue philosophy with monsters. He raised his hands and drew a circle between himself and the clock. A shield. Then he drew a second symbol, sharp and precise, like a scalpel. A severing mark. He pressed it toward the clock. The enemy pushed back. The hallway shook. The images on the walls turned into Stephen's own memories. His car crash, his broken hands, his rage. Christine walking away. The enemy pressed the pain forward, trying to make it a flood. Stephen's breath caught. His control wavered for a fraction of a second. And in that fraction, he felt the enemy's hand almost slip past his shield. Stephen clenched his jaw. He planted his feet. He spoke out loud, steady and simple, like a vow. "My guilt is not your weapon," he said. He pushed. The severing mark hit the clock. The clock face cracked. The hallway screamed. In the real world, Will arched off the floor and screamed too. Joyce sobbed and held him. Eleven's eyes snapped shut as she reached out with her power, pushing into the mental space like a battering ram. Her voice came out through clenched teeth. "Get out of him!" In the mind hallway, Stephen felt Eleven's force as a bright pressure behind him, holding the line. Stephen used that opening. He drove the severing mark deeper. The clock cracked wider. Then the enemy did something different. It stopped pushing. It offered. The hallway flickered into a clean, bright room. Stephen's hands. Perfect. Steady. Whole. A hospital again. A world where he never lost control. A world where nobody died because he was too late. The offer was quiet and sweet. A lie shaped like relief. Stephen's eyes hardened. He stepped back from the illusion. He looked straight through it at the shadow behind the clock. "You're not offering peace," Stephen said. "You're offering a cage." The shadow's calm cracked. Just slightly. Stephen didn't give it time to recover. He snapped his hands outward. The shield became a net. The net wrapped the clock. The severing mark flared, and the link snapped like a rope cut clean. The hallway shattered into gray dust. Stephen felt himself pulled backward and slammed back into his body. He gasped. Will went still, breathing hard, eyes wide, but present. Joyce grabbed Will's face and kissed his forehead, crying. "Will," she whispered. "Oh, thank God." 11 staggered, nose bleeding, eyes wet with rage. Stephen put one hand on the floor and steadied himself. The cloak wrapped tighter around his shoulders like it was bracing him. Hopper exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. Owens stared, shaken. You went inside his mind." Stephen wiped sweat from his brow. "Yes," he said. Dustin stared at Stephen like he was seeing him again for the first time. "You're not just portal guy," Dustin whispered. Stephen's voice was low. "No." Mike swallowed. "Did you see him?" Stephen looked toward the dark window, as if he could see the other world through it. "Yes," he said. "And now he has seen me more clearly too." Lucas's voice was tight. "So this is worse." Stephen didn't lie. "It is more focused, Stephen said. 11 wiped her nose with a shaking hand. He tried to trick you. Stephen looked at her. Yes. 11's eyes narrowed. Did it work? Stephen paused. Honesty mattered now. It almost did, he admitted. 11 stared at him for a long second. Then she nodded once, like she understood something important. Good, she said. That means he's scared. Stephen didn't argue. He looked at the lattice lines glowing faintly in the floor. The anchors were set. The base was warded. Hawkins was stronger than it had been in years. But the enemy was not gone. It had simply stopped acting like a storm. Now, it was acting like a person. Stephen stood slowly. His voice turned calm and certain. The voice he used when a room needed to listen. We stop reacting, he said. We stop chasing tears. We stop waiting for it to strike wherever it wants. Hopper narrowed his eyes. Then what? Stephen met Hopper's gaze. Then we go to it, Stephen said. On our terms. The room went quiet. Even Dustin didn't crack a joke. Stephen looked at 11. I need you with me, he said. 11's jaw tightened. I'm coming. Owens's voice was tight. You're talking about entering the Upside Down? Stephen nodded. Joyce hugged Will closer, terrified, but listening. Stephen's eyes scanned the group. We build one more thing, he said. A safe path, a controlled entry, a way to cut off the system while we operate. Dustin swallowed. So, we're doing the surgery. Stephen nodded once. Yes, he said, and the patient is trying to bite. Outside, the town of Hawkins went on pretending. Inside, the war got a new shape, not chaos, a plan. And somewhere beyond the cracks, the ticking returned. Soft, patient, and pleased. Because the enemy loved plans. Plans made people predictable. And predictable people were easier to break. 2 weeks passed, but Hawkins did not feel lighter. It felt tighter. Like the town was wearing a belt pulled one notch too far. Dr. Strange woke up before sunrise every day. Not because he liked mornings. He didn't. He woke up because the lattice demanded it. The lattice was his net of ward lines. The anchors at the lab site, the lake, and the Creel house fed its strength. The base circle in the abandoned building tied it all together. If any part weakened, Hawkins would start bleeding again. So Strange checked it. He stood in the center circle with his boots on dusty wood and his cloak wrapped over his shoulders. He held his hands over the glowing lines and listened with his senses. Some days it felt steady. Other days, it felt like someone was pressing a finger against it from the other side. Those were the days he worked harder. Dustin, Mike, and Lucas called the base HQ, no matter how many times Strange refused the word. It's a base, Strange said one morning without looking up. It's a base, Dustin agreed instantly. A base of operations, HQ. Strange drew a small symbol in the air. A tiny, ward light popped on in the corner. Dustin gasped like it was fireworks. You're making upgrades. They are safety markers, Strange said. Lucas walked in with a serious face and a notebook. He had started writing down everything Strange said, but in his own words, so he could explain it later. Lucas looked at the glowing corner light. What does that one mean? It means something crossed the outer line, Strange said. If it turns red, it means it crossed the inner line. Dustin raised his hand like he was in class. And if it turns like purple, does that mean it's a boss? Strange's eyes flicked. No. Dustin lowered his hand, offended. Could it mean boss? It will not mean boss, Strange said. The cloak floated behind Dustin and tugged his hood up over his head. Dustin yelped. Stop! I'm not your doll! Mike snorted. Strange pretended he didn't see it. 11 trained with Strange every afternoon. Not with weights, not with punching bags, with control. Strange sat across from her inside a circle of chalk-like powder and runes. He kept it simple for her. He didn't teach spells. He taught focus. "Your mind is strong," he told her, "but it is also a doorway. You must learn when to open it and when to lock it." 11 watched him with the same steady stare she always had. "I don't need locks," she said. Strange didn't argue. He simply raised 2 fingers. A small image appeared in the air between them, a thin crack like a tear in glass. The crack pulsed. 11's eyes narrowed. "That's him." "Yes," Strange said. "He's patient. That is what makes him dangerous." 11's jaw clenched. "I want to hurt him." "I know," Strange said. He held up a hand and formed a shield the size of a dinner plate. "Then learn this first." 11 lifted her hand and pushed. The shield bent but held. Strange nodded once. "Good." Again. Across town, Will had good hours and bad hours. On good hours, he sat with Joyce and tried to draw normal things. Dogs, trees, his friends on bikes. On bad hours, he would stop mid-breath and stare at nothing, and Joyce would feel her heart slam against her ribs. Those bad hours were rarer now. Strange had cut the active link that day in the base. The lattice also kept pressure off Hawkins. It helped, but it didn't erase what happened. It didn't erase fear that had lived inside Will for years. Hopper tried to act like he didn't care about any of this mystical planning. He still showed up at the base almost every day. He brought coffee and pretended he was only there to check the perimeter. He never said thank you. He never asked nicely. But he listened. One night, after the kids went home and 11 left with Joyce, Hopper stayed behind. Owens was there too, standing near the window with a tense look. Hopper pointed at the ward lines. "So this thing keeps the doors shut." "It helps," Strange corrected. "It makes it harder to open doors." Owens crossed his arms. "We're still seeing electrical spikes, still seeing strange readings." Strange's eyes narrowed. "Because the enemy is still probing." Hopper looked at Owens. "You keep saying we. Who is we?" Owens hesitated. That was answer enough. Hopper's voice turned colder. "You have people watching this." Owens didn't deny it. "We have to." Strange's tone stayed calm, but it sharpened. "Watching is not solving." Owens sighed. "From your point of view, no. From my point of view, you are a new risk that appeared in a town that already had too many." Hopper looked between them. "He's not the risk. The upside-down murder wizard is the risk." Owens flinched at the simple truth. Strange took a slow breath. "What do you want, Dr. Owens?" Owens met his gaze. "I want a way to end this that doesn't involve losing half the town." Strange nodded. "Then you will do what I ask." Owens's jaw tightened. "Which is?" Strange looked toward the dark corner of the room, as if he could sense the Creel house from here. "I need a controlled entry," Strange said. "A safe path into the Upside Down." Hopper stiffened. "No." Strange didn't turn. "Yes." Hopper stepped closer. "No, every time someone goes in there, someone doesn't come back the same." Strange finally faced Hopper. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "Every time we wait, it grows stronger." Owens rubbed his forehead. "If we do this, it will bring attention." Strange's eyes hardened. "It already has attention. It is waiting for our fear to do the work for it." Silence filled the base. Then the outer ward light flickered once. Not red, just a soft pulse, like a blink. Strange's head snapped up. The cloak tightened. Hopper's hand moved toward his gun by habit. Owens went still. Strange listened with his senses. Something had touched the lattice, not attacked it. Touched it like a person testing a locked door. Strange lowered his voice. "It knows we are planning something." Hopper swallowed. "Then it'll hit first." Strange nodded once. "Yes." Owen's phone rang. He looked at the screen and stiffened. Hopper stared. "Who is that?" Owens didn't answer. He stepped into the hallway to take it. Strange watched him go. The cloak shifted like it disliked this. Hopper's voice went low. "You trust him?" Strange didn't lie. "I trust that he fears chaos. That makes him predictable." Hopper grunted. "That's not trust." "No," Strange agreed. "It's strategy." Owens came back in, pale and tense. Hopper read his face. "What?" Owens swallowed. "Someone from my past. Someone who should not be here." Strange's eyes sharpened. "Name." Owens hesitated again. Then he spoke, like the word itself tasted bad. "Brener," Owens said. Joyce had told Strange pieces of that story. A man who treated children like lab equipment. A man who believed control was the same thing as safety. Strange's voice turned cold. "He cannot be allowed near them." Owens nodded. "Tight. I know." Hopper's face went dark. "If that man comes near 11, I will bury him." Strange looked at the door. "Where is he?" Owens' eyes flicked down. "He's asking to meet. Now." Strange stood. The base felt smaller all at once. Owens took Strange to a quiet office inside the facility. Hopper came too. Joyce insisted. 11 came because nobody was going to keep her out of a room that involved her life. Dustin, Mike, and Lucas were told to stay out. They didn't obey fully. They stayed in the hallway with their walkie and listened for any sign of trouble. The door opened. Dr. Martin Brener walked in like he was arriving at a dinner party. He wore a calm expression and a clean coat. His hair was neat. His eyes were sharp and careful. He looked at 11 first. "Jane," he said softly. 11's face didn't change. Her hands did. Her fingers curled slightly. "Ready." Hopper stepped forward like a wall. "Don't call her that." Brener's eyes slid to Hopper, then to Strange. His gaze lingered on the cloak as it moved on its own. Then he smiled, small and controlled. "And you," Brener said, "must be our visitor." Strange did not offer his hand. "Dr. Stephen Strange," Brener continued, as if he had tasted the name already. "A man who opens doors." Hopper snapped. "How do you know his name?" Brener's smile didn't waver. "Information travels." Strange's eyes narrowed. "State your purpose." Brener walked to the chair and sat as if invited. "My purpose," Brener said, "is to help." Owen's voice turned hard. "You don't help, you use." Brener looked hurt, like a teacher disappointed in a student. "Samuel," Brener said, "we are beyond old grudges." Hopper's voice was rough. "We're not." Brener looked back at 11. "You are stronger than ever," he said gently, "and yet you remain threatened. By the other world. By this new sorcerer." 11's eyes narrowed. "Don't talk about him." Brener finally looked at Strange again. "I find you fascinating," Brener said. "Not because of your power. Power is common. What is rare is control." Strange didn't blink. "You confuse control with cruelty." Brener's smile tightened. "Cruelty is an emotional word. I prefer necessary." Strange took one step forward. The room's air thickened slightly. Not threatening, just present. "Make your offer," Strange said. Brener nodded, as if pleased. "I can build you a lab," Brener said. "A real one, not chalk on a floor. I can provide equipment, power sources, cameras that see what normal cameras cannot. I can provide personnel." Owens snapped. "No." Brener continued calmly. "I can also provide a way home." The room went still. Even Hopper froze at that. Strange's eyes sharpened. "Explain." Brener lifted a finger. "There are ways to amplify weak points between worlds. You know this. I know this. With your spells and my machines, we can create a stable doorway." 11's eyes widened slightly. then narrowed again. Strange didn't show hope. He didn't show temptation. He only asked one question. "And the price?" Brener spread his hands like it was obvious. "Access." Hopper's face twisted. "No." Owens' voice shook with anger. "No." Brener's gaze stayed on Strange. "You want to go home. I want to understand. That is fair." Strange's voice was ice. "You want custody." Brener didn't deny it. "The girl is a key. You know she is. I know she is." 11's breathing turned rough. Hopper moved closer to her. "Back off." Brener looked mildly annoyed, like Hopper was a barking dog. "I'm not your enemy," Brener said. "Your enemy is that world. That mind. That thing wearing a man's shape." Strange's eyes narrowed. "Do not speak of it as if you understand it." Brener leaned forward. "But I do understand one thing. It will not stop. It will use your heart against you. It will use her heart against her. And then, you will lose." Strange held Brener's stare. Then Strange spoke in a voice that made the room feel very quiet. "You are not helping," Strange said. "You are trying to buy a child." Brener's smile vanished. His eyes hardened. "You think you are noble?" Brener said. "But you are a stranger in this world. You will leave, and then they will be alone again." Strange didn't flinch. "I do not abandon patients mid-surgery," Strange said. Brener stood, smooth and controlled. "Then I will wait for you to fail." Hopper's voice turned dangerous. "Get out." Brener walked to the door, then paused. He spoke without turning back. "Dr. Strange," he said, "if you ever decide you want a clean solution, you will come to me." The door closed behind him. The room exhaled like it had been holding its breath. Owens looked sick. "I didn't want him here." Strange's voice stayed calm but firm. "He will not stop." Hopper looked at 11. "You okay?" 11's jaw clenched. "I want him gone." Strange nodded once. "He is a problem for later." 11's eyes snapped to him. "No, he's a problem now." Strange didn't argue. He agreed in a simple way. "Yes," Strange said. "But the bigger problem is the thing behind the cracks." Hopper asked, "So what's the plan?" Strange's gaze turned inward for a moment. He felt the lattice. He felt the pressure. He felt a cold patience on the other side, like eyes waiting. He spoke. "We enter," Strange said. "Tonight." Owens stiffened. "Tonight. We aren't ready." Strange looked at him. "We will never feel ready." 11 nodded once. "Tonight." Hopper's face tightened, but he didn't refuse. Joyce swallowed, eyes wet. "Bring them back," she whispered. "Please." Strange met her gaze. "I will." That night, the base became a surgery room. Not clean, not perfect, but controlled. Strange drew a second circle around the main one. He used more binding powder. He placed small objects at 4 points, a broken compass, a handful of nails, a piece of burned wood from the gym floor. A small toy figure Dustin insisted was for morale. Strange didn't ask why it had a cape. He only said, "It stays outside the inner circle." Dustin huffed. "Fine." Mike and Lucas stood with walkies, ready to relay information. Nancy and Steve were there too, faces tense. Robin paced by the doorway, talking fast to hide fear. Max sat on a crate with her arms crossed, like she refused to be impressed by anything ever again. Will sat near Joyce, wrapped in a blanket, eyes wide. Hopper stood at the edge like a guard. Owens watched from the back, face pale. Strange stepped into the circle with 11. The cloak settled on Strange's shoulders, heavy and loyal. 11 looked around. "What do we do if we get lost?" Strange kept it simple. "We do not separate." 11 nodded. Strange raised his hands. The circle lit up. The lattice lines in the floor brightened like they were feeding power into the center. The air thickened. Then it split. A doorway opened. Not jagged like Hawkins' rips. Clean, controlled. Beyond it was the Upside Down, dark sky, ash floating, vines on dead trees, the smell of wet rot and metal. Dustin whispered, almost reverent. "Okay, that's the worst." Steve swallowed. "You two sure about this?" 11 didn't look at him. "Yes." Strange looked back at the group, his voice carried. "Defend the anchors," Strange said. "If the lattice weakens, we are trapped." Hopper nodded once. "We've got it." Mike's voice was tight. "Be careful." Strange looked at him. "Stay inside the ward. Do not chase sounds." Dustin raised a hand. "If the lights go red, then you pull everyone into the inner circle," Strange finished. "Yes?" The cloak fluttered toward Dustin's belt again, eyeing the walkie like it wanted to steal it. Dustin slapped the walkie protectively. "No." Strange turned back to the doorway. He stepped through. 11 stepped through with him. The doorway snapped smaller behind them, but it stayed open like a held breath. They were in the Upside Down, and Hawkins was now on the other side of one thin bridge. Strange's boots sank slightly into soft, damp ground. 11's eyes narrowed as she stared into the dark. He felt it at once. The mind, the system. It surrounded them like invisible fog, not attacking yet. Watching. Strange spoke quietly to 11. "It wants you to panic." 11's voice was low. "I won't." They moved forward together. Strange created small floating lights to mark their path. Not bright, just enough. The air here reacted to magic like skin reacting to heat. The vines quivered. The ash swirled. They reached a place that mirrored Hawkins' streets, but broken. A street sign stood bent. A dead car sat half swallowed by vines. Buildings were covered in pulsing growth like infected tissue. 11's breathing tightened. "He's close," she said. Strange closed his eyes for 1 second and listened. He felt a pull, like a thread tugging from Hawkins to here. The anchor. Not a physical thing. A pattern in the web. Strange opened his eyes and pointed. That way. They moved. Then the world changed. Not around them. Inside them. Strange heard a ticking. Tick. 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 He stopped. 11 stopped too, eyes darting. Ahead, the air formed a shape. A hallway appeared where there should have been open street. A long, clean hallway. A grandfather clock at the far end. Strange's jaw tightened. 11 hissed. "He's trying to split us." Strange nodded once. "Stay with me." The hallway pulled at them like gravity. 11 resisted with her will. Strange resisted with a shield. But the mind space was strong here. It was Henry's house. His story. Strange stepped forward anyway. He refused to be dragged like prey. He walked into the hallway with 11 at his side. The air thickened. The walls flickered with images, like before. This time, the images were not only fear. They were offers. A bright room, a clean city, people laughing, a quiet life. Strange's hands, whole and steady. A voice slid into his mind, smooth and calm. "Stephen." Strange didn't answer. 11's eyes flashed with anger. "Shut up," the voice chuckled, like it enjoyed her. "Jane," it said, "you could have a family that never leaves, a world that never hurts you again." 11's breathing turned rough. Her nose began to bleed. Strange lifted a hand, placing a shield around her mind like a dome. "Focus," he told her. "He is lying." 11 shook, but she nodded. The hallway darkened. Henry appeared, more solid now than before. Tall. Still. Eyes like cold glass. "Vecna." He tilted his head slightly, studying Strange. "I have wondered what you are," Vecna said. His voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. Strange's voice stayed calm. "A man trying to stop you." Vecna smiled slowly. "A man who opens doors," Vecna said. "A man who decides what should be allowed." Strange felt the trap tighten. Vecna wanted a debate, not because he cared about words, because words were handles. Strange refused to give him a handle. He shifted to action. He drew a ring with his hands and snapped it forward. A binding spell shot toward Vecna like a net. Vecna didn't dodge. He lifted one hand. The net froze mid-air, as if time had thickened around it. Vecna's eyes flicked to 11. "You brought a weapon," he said softly. 11's face twisted with rage. She lifted both hands and pushed. The air shook. Vecna slid back half a step, like he had hit a strong wind. He didn't fall, but his eyes narrowed. Strange saw it. This wasn't an even match in the simple way. Vecna wasn't stronger than Strange in raw defense magic, but Vecna's battlefield was mind and connection. That was the danger. Strange changed the battlefield. He clapped his hands and opened a portal behind Vecna. Not to Hawkins, to empty space in the Upside Down, far above. Gravity did the rest. Vecna's body dropped backward toward the portal. For a fraction of a second, it looked like it would work. Then Vecna's face didn't change at all. The portal shattered like glass. Strange's eyes narrowed. Vecna wasn't breaking it with strength. He was breaking it with rule control inside this space. "You are talented," Vecna said, "but you are new here." Strange's voice was flat. "And you are trapped here." Vecna's smile widened. "Trapped?" Vecna repeated, amused. "No, I am home." Then Vecna struck, not at Strange's body, at his guilt. The hallway vanished. Strange stood in a hospital again. Christine's face. Tired. Hurt. "You always think you can fix it," she said, "but you always break something else." Strange's breath caught. He knew it wasn't real, but his heart still reacted. That was the point. Vecna's voice slid under the illusion like a knife under a bandage. "I can give you the clean solution," Vecna whispered. "I can send you home. I can restore what you lost. All you have to do is stop protecting her." Strange's hands trembled for half a second. Not from weakness, from anger. He had seen this move. He had lived it. Monsters always tried the same thing. They offered relief. Then they asked for cruelty. Strange's eyes hardened. He spoke out loud, slow and clear. "I do not trade children," Strange said. The hospital image flickered. Vecna tried again, sharper. "Then you will fail again." Strange's jaw clenched. "Maybe," he said, "but I will fail as myself." He snapped his fingers. The illusion broke. The hallway returned. 11 was still beside him, shaking, nose bleeding, but standing. She looked at him with fierce focus. "Don't listen." "I'm not," Strange said. Vecna tilted his head, almost curious. "So stubborn?" Strange didn't respond. He reached into the lattice connection that still linked him to Hawkins through the doorway. He felt the 3 anchors like 3 steady heartbeats. He spoke a short phrase, and the anchors flared. In Hawkins, the ward lights in the base brightened. Mike shouted, "They're pulling power!" Lucas yelled into the walkie, "Anchors are spiking!" Hopper barked orders. "Steve, with me! Nancy, take the back exit! Keep everyone inside the inner circle!" Outside the base, the air began to buzz. A thin crack opened near the wall. Not big, but hungry. Demobats spilled through. Steve swung his bat with nails and cursed loudly. Nancy fired a shotgun, face pale but determined. Robin dragged Max behind a crate. Max screamed. "I'm fine," Dustin yelled. "This is a boss wave! This is a boss wave!" Strange heard none of their words, but he felt the pressure. Vecna was trying to distract them by forcing Hawkins to fight for the anchors. Strange made a choice. He would end this fast, not by killing Vecna, by cutting his grip on Hawkins. Strange turned slightly toward 11. "I need you to hold him," he said. 11's eyes narrowed. "How?" "Push him," Strange said. "Not back. Down. Pin his mind to this spot. Eleven's hands rose, her face tightened. Blood ran from her nose. She didn't wipe it. She pushed. The air screamed. Vecna's body shuddered, like a pressure wave hit him from the inside. His smile disappeared. For the first time, he looked annoyed. That was enough. Strange drew a symbol in the air that looked like a lock closing. Then he drew a second one, like a knife. He pressed both symbols into the space behind Vecna, where the hallway's back wall should have been. Reality there rippled. A core line appeared, a thin thread running from Vecna's mind through the upside down toward Hawkins. The connection. Strange grabbed it with his magic like a surgeon grabbing a bleeding vessel. Vecna felt it at once. His eyes widened slightly. No, Vecna hissed. He lunged forward with his mind, trying to slam Strange's thoughts apart. Strange's shields flared. They held. He wasn't weak, but the pressure was real. Strange's teeth clenched. 11 pushed harder, face twisting in pain as she pinned Vecna's attention. Strange spoke through the strain. "Hopper," he said into the air, knowing the lattice carried more than power. "Now." In Hawkins, Hopper saw the outer ward lights turn orange-white. He understood. "Hit the anchors!" Hopper shouted. Owens yelled, "How?" Hopper grabbed the walkie and barked. "Lab site team, surge it! Lake team, surge it! Creel house team, hold!" Owens' people flipped switches and followed Strange's instructions written in simple steps on paper. They didn't understand the magic, but they could follow orders. At the lab site, the anchor rune glowed. At the lake, the anchor rune glowed. At the Creel house, the anchor rune glowed, and the walls groaned like they hated it. The lattice tightened, like a net being pulled. In the upside-down hallway, Strange felt it. He pulled the connection thread taut. Vecna fought, but he was suddenly outnumbered. Not by people, by structure, by a lock built around his favorite hunting ground. Strange looked straight at Vecna. "This town is not your doorway anymore," Strange said. Vecna's eyes burned. "You think you can lock me out?" Strange's voice was calm. "I can lock you away from them." He raised his hand and made a sharp slicing motion. The knife symbol cut the thread. The hallway shook like a bridge collapsing. Vecna screamed, not like a monster, but like a man being denied. 11 screamed too, from effort, from pain, from relief. The thread snapped. A wave of force rolled outward. Strange threw up a shield around himself and 11. The cloak wrapped tight, holding them together. The hallway shattered. They fell and landed back on the broken street of the upside down. The ticking stopped. For one heartbeat, everything was quiet. Then the upside down screamed in a different way. The system didn't like losing access. Vines surged. Ash swirled like a storm. In the distance, something vast moved, like the mind flare was turning its attention toward them. Strange stood, breathing hard. 11 swayed. He caught her elbow and kept her upright. Her eyes were unfocused for a second. Then they snapped back. "Is he gone?" she whispered. Strange shook his head once. "No." 11's face fell. Strange added, firm. "But he is cut off from Hawkins. He can't reach through will like before. He can't open easy doors." 11's shoulders sagged with exhaustion. In Hawkins, the base shook. The crack that had opened by the wall shrank, like it was being squeezed shut. The demobats fell back, confused. Steve slammed the last one into a shelf and backed away, panting. Dustin screamed, "We're winning! We're actually winning!" Lucas shouted, "Don't jinx it." Mike stared at the doorway to the upside-down portal in the base circle. It flickered, unstable. "Hopper!" Mike yelled. "The door is—" Strange felt it too. The controlled doorway was collapsing, not because of failure, because the lock he had just made was forcing the system to seal. The lattice wanted to close all openings. That included the one Strange had made. Strange's eyes widened. If the doorway closed now, he and 11 would be trapped. He grabbed 11's hand. "Time," he said. 11's eyes widened, fear cutting through exhaustion. "No. Yes," Strange said. "Now." He opened a portal, not through the upside down, directly to the base circle, using the lattice as a guide. It was harder than normal, like pushing open a door while someone else was trying to close it. Strange pushed anyway. The portal formed, small, shaking, but real. He and 11 sprinted through. They burst into the base like two people surfacing from deep water. The portal snapped shut behind them. The ward lights dimmed, then steadied. The room was a mess. Broken crates, dust in the air, people panting, Steve's bat in his hands. Nancy's shotgun lowered. Joyce ran forward and grabbed 11, crying. Hopper stepped up to Strange, eyes wide. "You did it?" Hopper asked. Strange's chest rose and fell with slow breaths. He nodded once. "For now," Strange said. Owens stared at Strange like he couldn't decide if he was grateful or terrified. "What happens now?" Owens asked. Strange looked at the lattice lines in the floor. They pulsed calmly now. "The system will try new methods," Strange said, "but it no longer has the easy road." 11 lifted her head from Joyce's shoulder. "He'll be angry." "Yes," Strange said, "and he will be patient." Dustin took 2 shaky steps forward. His face was pale, but his eyes were bright. "So," Dustin said, voice cracking, "we locked him out." Strange nodded. Dustin swallowed. "That means we won, right?" Strange didn't lie. "It means we bought time," Strange said. Mike's face tightened. "And you?" Strange looked at him. He had come here because he was pulled. He had stayed because children were in danger. Now the danger was contained, but not ended. And the doorway home still wasn't stable. Strange tried, quietly, to open a portal to his universe. A ring of sparks formed, then sputtered out. The room went still. Hopper watched him carefully. "Still stuck." Strange nodded once. Owens spoke softly. "Brener said he could—" Strange's gaze snapped to Owens. Cold. Final. "No," Strange said. Owens swallowed. "I had to say it." Strange looked around the room, at the tired faces, at the kids who were still standing, at 11, leaning but alive. He spoke, steady. "I will remain," Strange said, "until Hawkins is stable enough that it can survive without me." Hopper's brow furrowed. "You're staying here?" Strange's voice was simple. "Yes." Dustin whispered, amazed. "We have Dr. Strange now." Strange shot him a look. Dustin corrected himself fast. "We have Stephen." The cloak floated behind Dustin and patted his shoulder, like it approved the correction. Max, sitting on her crate, wiped blood from a small cut on her lip and stared at Strange. "So you're like a town wizard now," Max said. Strange's mouth twitched. "I'm not a town wizard," Max shrugged. "Sure." Hopper exhaled, long and tired. Then he did something Strange didn't expect. He held out his hand, not to shake like friends, to make a deal like men who understood war. "Don't scare my kids," Hopper said. Strange took Hopper's hand. "I won't," Strange said. Hopper nodded once. "And if you ever turn into a problem," Strange finished the sentence for him, "you will try to stop me." Hopper's eyes stayed hard. "Yeah." Strange didn't look offended. He respected it. Owens looked away because he knew Hopper was right to plan. In the far corner, Will watched Strange with wide eyes. He looked like a boy seeing a lighthouse after years at sea. Strange walked over and crouched down so he wasn't towering. Will flinched slightly, then held still. Strange spoke gently. How do you feel? Will swallowed. Quieter. Strange nodded. Good, Will whispered. Is he gone? Strange didn't lie. Not to a child who had paid for lies with fear. No, Strange said, but he can't grab you the same way anymore. Will's eyes filled with tears. He nodded. Joyce covered her mouth and cried silently. The base settled into a tired silence. Outside, Hawkins stayed, dark and normal. Inside, the rules had changed. A lock had been set, and the person holding the key was now part of the town. A week later, the base didn't feel like a panic room anymore. It still wasn't cozy, but it didn't feel like it was about to collapse. The ward lights glowed steady. The air inside the circle felt firm, like a strong wall. That afternoon, the kids brought a board and paper and dice. Dustin placed them on a crate like it was sacred. We're doing it, Dustin said. Strange walked in, saw the setup, and stopped. No, Strange said immediately. Mike tried to sound casual. It's just a game. It is a game that names monsters, Strange said. Lucas shrugged. We already named them. Max smirked. He hates the naming. Dustin smiled like he was proud. He hates the naming. Strange sighed and pinched the bridge of his nose. He had faced cosmic threats. He had bargained with strange beings. He had walked through impossible places. And now he was being outmaneuvered by teenagers with dice. 11 sat in the corner with her knees pulled up, watching. Will sat beside Joyce, wrapped in a blanket, quieter than before. Hopper leaned against the wall with a coffee, pretending not to care. Nancy flipped through a notebook, listening with one ear. Steve stood near the door, still on guard duty, even when he didn't need to be. Robin whispered, "If you don't let them do it, they'll do it harder." Strange glanced at Robin. "Do it harder." Robin nodded. "Yes." Strange looked back at the table. He could feel the lattice, calm, steady. He could also feel the pressure beyond it. Not close, but present, like a storm on the horizon. The kids needed something normal, a way to put fear into a box they could open and close. Strange took a slow breath. "Fine," he said. Dustin nearly fell over. "Yes." Strange raised one finger. "One rule." Dustin froze, respectful. "Yes, sir." Strange's eyes narrowed. "Do not name it after me." Dustin's smile faltered. That's tough." Mike laughed quietly. Max snorted. Lucas said, "That's fair." Dustin sighed like he had been asked to give up oxygen. "Fine." They started the game. It wasn't loud. It wasn't silly in a careless way. It was serious under the jokes. Dustin described a dungeon. Lucas corrected him. Max insulted the imaginary monster. Mike tried to keep everyone together. Will listened and nodded at the parts that made sense to him. 11 didn't play at first. She watched. Then, when Dustin slid a die toward her, she stared at it like it might explode. "You roll," Dustin said softly. "Just once." 11 looked at the die, then she rolled it. It bounced and stopped. Dustin leaned in, eyes wide. That's a really good roll." 11's mouth twitched. Not a smile. Almost. Strange watched her. He felt something in his chest loosen. Not the danger, but the weight. The cloak floated down from its hook and drifted toward the table. It hovered over the dice like it was choosing. Then it picked up the 20-sided die with one corner and floated away with it. Dustin yelled, "Hey!" The cloak drifted to Strange and dropped the die into his open palm like it was giving him a gift. Strange looked at it, unimpressed. Dustin pointed, outraged. "It stole my die." The cloak fluttered like it didn't care. Mike laughed. "It likes him." Dustin threw his hands up. "It is biased." Strange held the die for a moment. A small, ridiculous object. And yet it mattered, because it was proof the world still had room for small things. He set the die back on the table. The cloak immediately tried to take it again. Strange tapped the cloak gently. Enough. The cloak froze, then slowly backed off, like a child caught stealing cookies. Hopper chuckled into his coffee. Joyce smiled through tired eyes. For a few minutes, it felt like Hawkins was just a town with kids playing a game. Then the outer ward light blinked once. Not red, just a blink. Strange's head lifted. The room quieted. He listened with his senses. A touch. A distant test. Not here. Not now. But a reminder. Strange stood and walked to the doorway. He traced a small symbol on the frame with 2 fingers. A quiet lock. Not flashy. Not loud. Just steady. He looked back at the room. Kids. Adults. Fighters. Survivors. A strange little family built from fear and stubborn hope. Strange's voice was low, more to himself than to anyone else. "Life continues," he said. Mike looked up. "What?" Strange shook his head. "Nothing." He looked out into the dark street beyond the abandoned building. Hawkins was still Hawkins, but it was not alone anymore, and neither was he. Behind him, the dice rolled again and clicked against the table. Dustin shouted, "Okay, listen! The monster has weakness to fire!" Strange closed the door halfway, leaving it open just enough to hear them. He rested his hand on the warded frame. The lock held. For now. And that was enough for tonight.